Hey everybody, it's Bram Duffee back for public speaking class today. We're going to get into talking about visual aids in your help with presentations. And right now you can see the two that I have on the screen. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. So let's dive into it. And as we dive into it, I want to talk about why we're doing visual aids right now in the class. So before now, I have asked that you not use visual aids of any kind because I wanted to dedicate a good amount of time to the topic and also be able to get over the hump when it comes to focus on you as the performer. You know, the goal for our class always is to have your face and torso in camera view all the time. And it's very difficult to do that when you have all these other things flying around. So I just want to say that we started out with just getting you on camera. And then we got you on camera doing something, or at least talking about something through the demonstration. And next, we're going to get into more difficult work because we're going to be talking about an informative kind of speech. And to get you ready for that informative speech this week, I'm going to have you to choose a visual aid that you'd like to do a presentation about, for you to talk about. But while you do your presentation, I want you to make sure that you don't neglect the things that have been missing. So there have been some problems, okay? So let's talk about some of the common problems that we can easily fix together to make everybody a great speaker. One is that I think that overall, some of us speakers may not be comfortable with transitions, because I think if you do a transition during a speech, it can sound mechanical, it can sound boring, it can sound like you're not being real. And what I'm saying about a transition is saying something like this. Now that we have talked about the pink side of this, next we're going to go ahead and look at burgundy. So what I just did there was I just went, we did talk about this and now we're talking about that. And making the statement like that can seem unnatural, but I want to tell you that it's not. And I want to tell you that it signals the structure of the speech for the audience and they need to hear it. And so if you say something like that 5 times during a presentation, it's not that bad. It's okay to do. So I want to see if you're not specifically doing that, I want to make sure that you do. And know that face on camera without distractions is an important thing. The last thing about what we've been up to so far is don't forget your outline. I don't want to have to take off points. Don't forget that an outline is always due. Okay, so looking at presentational aids today, I want to begin by talking about something called the multimedia effect. And this is a learning principle that suggests that most people learn more effectively when information is presented both verbally and visually. So the strength of any presentation is the content. And it's crucial to, figure this part out before you just dig into the points of your speech, because everything has to be well aligned. You can imagine a presentation with a slide that's off. The whole time that slide is off, it will distract everybody. And so there's a lot of different presentational aids that are available to you. PowerPoint is the most obvious one, but we're going to dig into lots of talk. One of the key parts to this has to do with simplicity and design. And I say that because your slides, if you're putting up slides, there's something that should really be processed within 3 seconds. So you can imagine that you look up at my poster right here, it says Design Ranch. So you should be able to, take that in within 3 seconds. You can see, you can get a general idea about the style of it, you can read the words of it, but it's not gonna waste a lot of your time. The reason is because it's designed to support the speaker, not to distract the audience. And so it's just important that to make that happen, we want to use text sparingly and really present one major idea per slide. That way we avoid clutter. And we follow the 6x6 rule. This is something that suggests that using no more than 6 words in a line and then 6 lines on a slide is like the best way maybe to keep that simple. So if you think about just what people can take in, it's important to use a small amount of words. I prefer to do bulleted points when possible, but all that does is allow people to glance, take something in quickly to support what you're saying. Sometimes if you're able to use active verb form to keep the message clear and concise, and then maybe do something to create concise titles or illustrate something instead of just stating your point. These are all great things. I love it how we have a lot going on out there with YouTube and TikTok and the use of add-ins and fun things to the video. Our class, however, I want to remind you, is not is a no editing class, right? So that means that everything should be done in one take, just like I do with our lecture time, and no multiple takes and no editing software, and that means we don't add in stuff. Okay. To keep things simple, I want you to consider maybe like if you're gonna prepare a slide on buying a used car. So if you have a slide for them on this, a cluttered slide might have long sentences like prepare in advance, know the market value of several cars, and know what you're interested in going to shop for. Something like that could be simplified and say know the car's market value. So it's like basically a theme of the discussion instead of all the information, because some of the nightmare presenters are people who stand up and read off of the slides. And what we study and what we do in this class is extemporaneous style speaking. That's when you look at a slide or you look at a note and you're able to, based on the fact that you've practiced it, the information a lot, you're able to deliver the message and not read off a slide word for word sentences. Okay, so if we get that out of our mind, get out of the fact that we're going to put up paragraphs or sentences to read and are only putting out general ideas because we're prepared to speak that, I think that helps. And the other thing is that our goals here are to support the message and to not distract. That's it. So if you think about what else is going on with this, if it does something else, it's not. We don't need it. Okay, so don't distract. Support the message. That's it. So to help that happen, consistency in the design is also critical, right? Because if you move from slide to slide and have crazy different types of content, or you have different font sizes and styles that don't have the same balance, or you use different colors or different templates, this text styling, or maybe using it like lowercase letters instead of uppercase, and just the general page layout, that stuff can be distracting. Okay, so we want to think about putting together a professional presentation that will not create those things. And it's something to think about how we could judge someone for having a fancy presentation, but the goal is not fancy. The goal is delivering a message that's intended. And so when I was in school, I did a bachelor's degree in public relations, and I took a whole class, one semester, the whole class was about font, F-O-N-T, like choosing how the message is going to be presented, whether it's through a particular size or style, or things like Times New Roman versus Arial, and the all of these kinds of things. It's a lot to think about how something can pull in a message for somebody, and other things might not. So when you select your typeface styles and the fonts that you use for the posters and charts or whatever that you have, the typeface is the specific kind of lettering. So that's the Arial, the Times New Roman, or Courier. And a font is a set of typeface. And so when you look at the size of the point size, they may not be equivalent on the slide when you look at it size-wise from a poster versus a PowerPoint slide, versus something interactive. So these kinds of typefaces can really help with the message because they can draw your eye in. So one of the typefaces is called a serif typeface. So it's serif and sans serif. But the serif typefaces have like what I call eyelashes on the letters. My favorite serif typeface to use is called Georgia. And it's because it has a really old-time feeling, but it's like an old-time feel crossed with Times New Roman. And so it's how it comes across a little easier on the eye. So if you're trying to read something really fast, that serif typeface can make a difference and really help. But the sans serif typeface, that's something that looks a little more block-like and linear. The best one example would be Arial. And it would be better for small amounts of text. And so maybe if you're going to do a big title, right, to draw that in or pick that up, maybe that would be better. But in general, certain font categories have to be used sparingly. And it's because some things are like cursive, they're similar to handwriting, and like novelty fonts, which are like flashy or cartoonish, but these things can end up being distraction. So you want to check for legibility and make sure that there's a distinct color background difference from your font, and that you're using the similar typefaces. Of course, doing things like avoid all capital letters, and we want to limit 2 kinds of typefaces per slide. Things like bold and italics we use sparingly. Basically, you aren't there to make flowery, crazy things on visual aids. For the goal is to support the message and to not distract, right? So if we think about all the stuff that you could do in visual aid world, gosh, if it distracts, it's not what we're going for. So we have to be careful. So the other thing to mention is color, because color can play a role in the presentation aids. If you use color the correct way, you can draw attention to key points or influence the mood of the presentation and make things easier to see. And keep the background color consistent, because that helps with this in your goal. But at the same time, we want to choose colors that contrast with the background, and limit the colors to probably 3. I would suggest that if you have the typeface color probably needs to either be black or white, probably. And to contrast that, we want to avoid those middle of the road colors, right? So we don't want to probably use a light blue with a white typeface. because that background is not going to be strong enough to give you the kind of contrast that you need. At the same time, we wouldn't want to maybe put an orange background with a white typeface because that's going to be too flashy and then as a result distracting. So that's how color can play a role. And I want to just emphasize the goals are that we're not going to distract and that we're going to support the message that you are saying, because really the information that the person is going to learn and you as the presenter are the things that are on stage. All right, so next let's look at software. There are lots of different software programs available for creating dynamic presentations, and I think PowerPoint's most popular. Also, Apple has Keynote. These are really popular choices because they just have user-friendly interfaces. And if you prefer a web-based tool, there's Prezi or SlideRocket, President. But each of these kinds of platforms have different features that can enhance your presentation. It's crucial to remember that your spoken word and your physical presence are the main goals here. And so any kinds of tools that we have like this, we want to prevent it being a distraction. So when you prepare your presentation, you want to begin by developing a plan. Start with that speaking outline and then think about what points could better explain out with visual aids. And this is the kind of thing that's going to help determine the content of your slides and then how many slides you're going to need and how they're going to be arranged. And then it's also going to help you, choose the software. But technical glitches during a presentation can be really distracting and disrupt your flow. I have had tons and tons of them. And I would say that common risks include projection, like the projector malfunctions. Maybe a file doesn't work with an operating system. You don't have internet. The computer drive froze. And it's just like, gosh, to avoid these issues, we want to save the files to a reliable source and keep all those files in the same folder. Do things like familiarize yourself with the presentation computer and all that stuff that is attached to it way in beforehand, and confirm that the version of that software is going to work on both computers. If you are using your personal computer, it's got to be fully charged and always also have a backup plan. So there's a lot that goes into this, and I would say that there is never a presentation that I do when I don't have backup notes that are on paper. And that includes ones that I do for my podcast, ones that I do for a public speech, ones that I do for you. And part of the reason is that if I use my phone can have problems or be distracting to me or go out. If I use my laptop or computer, the same kind of thing can happen. So we want to prepare for everything. We want to be live and ready and go. And so this is the kind of stuff that you want to think about. When it comes to finding media for your presentations, there's a lot of resources out there also. And you can put photos and illustrations, clip art, video, all kinds of stuff like that is available for media options. I just want to mention that it's really important to avoid copyright infringement. And so we want to cite the source of the material on the same slide that it appears, even if the fair use law applies. And be wary of things that are labeled as royalty free, especially if you're developing a presentation for work and it's going to have your company's name attached to it, because you want to make sure that you can use stuff without restriction. So whenever possible, consider creating your own media. That way that kind of thing is prevented. All right, so there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's a lot of different options to consider when choosing a type of visual aid. And we can talk about things like props and models and pictures and graphs and tables and videos and multimedia presentations. But what you pick, that choice depends on the nature of your topic and the best way to convey your message. So props, for example, these are things like any object that can help demonstrate your point. And so I have a prop here. This is a special ruler I have that allows me to use a see-through to hold up next to letters. And by doing so, I'm able to choose what letter font size I'm lined up with. Also, I'm able to count columns and rows height. And the aid that I have there is considered a prop. And when using these kinds of things, it's essential to keep them hidden until ready to use, practice them so that you're able to show them correctly, and make sure that everybody can see that. Because if everybody can't see it, it's all of a sudden now a distraction. And pictures are two-dimensional representations. These are like, you know what a picture is. It's a drawing, a diagram, a poster. All these things can be really useful. But the thing is that diagrams or schematic drawings can illustrate how something works or is operating. But if you have something like a map, you can visualize an area for better understand it, or to see the relationships between things, or illustrate proportions. Just the photograph might be a big way to pull in a moment and show off the feel of something. It's just that it totally depends on the message that you're working to put out there. Multimedia aids are things that are like audio clips, which could be a short sound, or it could be music or a speech recording. Multimedia aids like that might be drawn from a movie clip, or combine things that engage and show off points in a vivid way. I think it's super awesome. The problem with multimedia aids is that a lot of times we end up using things like that distract the message. So it's just important that that stays in our mind when we start to play with and think about all the different software or things that are out there for you. If used correctly, though, the listener visual aids can motivate somebody's attention, because it will help with things like transitions, which I talked about are a problem for a lot of us right now, or telling a story or reinforcing a point. It just helps you offer a much richer variety of information and gives someone an opportunity to think and process. And if you have pauses during your presentation, it gives them something to look at during that focused time. So, like digital storytelling is out there. That's like a multimedia that helps tell a story about yourself or others, and it can create a memorable, moment for the audience there. When incorporating audio and video into the presentation, it's just critical to cue the segment before and make sure that the audience knows what they're going to experience before playing it. Because if you don't, it looks like you're just it looks unplanned if you don't say that you're going to do it before you do it. And part of having a polished presentation means that you are always doing things where you explain something before they get it, then they see it, and then you reiterate later. So once you play something like that, you want to reiterate the relevance to the key points. There are also computer-generated aids and displays, and Apple Keynote, Prezi, PowerPoint, all these things that are out there. But chalkboards and whiteboards, it's just like old-fashioned stuff, even though it's just it's still out there, it still exists. So we want to talk about it, because these kinds of things, when you have a chalkboard or a whiteboard, it's really going to be beneficial for impromptu explanations or simple explanations. And also can be used to engage with the audience. If you're going to try to pull together a brainstorming session or promote interest, and at the same time, there's some disadvantages to chalkboards, and I bet you are already going to guess what I'm going to say. And that is, you're not looking at your audience, because they require that the speaker has to turn your back to the audience and then make listeners wait while you write on the board. And it's going to require legible handwriting that's going to be clear to all viewers. When I teach, a lot of times I will pull down the screen over what I write so that the students aren't thinking about it and we're not diving into it until the time comes for that. Or I might fill out, like last time I had 2 different walls that had whiteboards. And so the wall that was not the direction that my students were facing, I wrote things on that other wall so that when time came to it in my lecture, I was able to refer over to that, but didn't take up the time to write during the lecture. I think that if I was teaching a math class, I would use that kind of a whiteboard, blackboard only for impromptu problems to work out with the class. Otherwise, I think that you can, those overhead transparencies are pretty awesome, because what that allows them to do is to write on a screen, and that screen projects to the board. So teaching math and having problems set up that you can work with on that would be super ideal. So I know that there are computer programs to help teachers do that. Just mentioning it because it's like one of the more difficult things when you deal with numbers. And similar to how I say I like to handle blackboards and whiteboards, if you have a flip chart, these really large sheets of paper, you can write, draw, offer options, bullet points on that, put it together in advance, and draw on the paper as you speak, maybe mark things off. But it's cool to have an interactive tool that you can also have ahead of time. And a simple word or a drawing can be a lot more powerful sometimes than an actual, slide. Handouts are something worth mentioning also. And we're talking about like a page size kind of handout that's going to convey information. And it's a lot of times really impractical to present stuff any other way than a handout. That's the only reason that they would get it. So if we're looking at something that's highly technical, then we would suggest passing that out after the presentation if possible. But when we look at the information, if it's highly technical, I would rather it be in the audience's hand than up on the board for them to see, right? So it depends on how much time that they're going to need to analyze this with you during the presentation, whether you choose one or the other. But the goal is to not distract and always support the message. The last thing I want to mention are posters. Posters have been around forever, and they're still commonly used because they're things that you can put together in advance to draw your audience members into the speech, stimulate interest. And a lot of times they're on an easel. And this kind of thing is easy to put together in a way that's similar to the flip chart or other tools, but you can just do more stuff when you have a poster. And so it just depends on the goals of what you're up to. I know that this week you are going to be working through the thinking about these topics of what presentation tools to use to pull off the most awesome stuff. And we're going to get to listen to classmates talk about some of the tools that they're interested in. And so I look forward to our discussion this week in the discussion board, and as well as your videos as we dive into this topic to look at some of the detail that can come with presentational aids for our listeners. So until next time, you're doing great. Hope you're hanging in there. If you need me, holler.